The first night I spent in my van, I was so anxious, and I just kept thinking, what if I've made a huge mistake?
What if this isn't for me? And I can't really articulate really how I feel right now, except for on edge and afraid.
There was an element of worrying whether I'd be safe, but mostly I was just worried that I wasn't going to enjoy it. That it's a lifestyle that isn't for everybody, and I'm one of those everybodies that it isn't for, and I would hate it. And now I'm 18 months into full-time van life, and this is what I've learned. Let's start with the story of how I ended up living in a van. So, up until about 2020, I never really owned a car, and COVID happened, lockdowns happened. I wanted to go places that I suddenly couldn't get anymore because I couldn't take a train. My world just felt really small. And my best friend actually lent me her car for a little bit, which was really, really good. And then I got a taste of like, oh, I can go places. And I got really into hiking in that time as well. And then she decided after a few months she was going to sell the car. And this is the same time as the whole van life Instagram thing just really took off. And it certainly came to my attention for the first time. So I've seen all these people, doing these ridiculous nice vans and like living this crazy alternative life. And I was like, wow, that's interesting and really cool. So I decided to buy a small van and just convert that so I could go on little weekend like hiking trips and stuff. So that was early 2021. I bought a Vauxhall Combo. I spent about £1,000 in about 4 months converting that into just a really basic little like hotel room on wheels, just a bed in the back and some really, really basic facilities. I've actually done a tour on this, so I'll put that up here, wherever that goes. And you can just check that one out if you want to. So I did this. Just after I'd finished it in that summer, I started dating this guy who lived in a van. And we'd go on trips. And that just really gave me a feel for what it would feel like to live in a van. I really saw that lifestyle firsthand. And it planted this little seed in my brain of, what if I did this myself full time? Because I'd already kind of considered that when I bought the small van and realised, or I decided, I guess, that I'd hate it. It wouldn't be for me. It's not the lifestyle that I would ever feel comfortable in, right? So this seed is planted and I'm like, oh, should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? I mean, I had a flat. I had a whole flat full of furniture. If I were to do that, it would be a massive, massive, massive upheaval. And I spent months on the fence. Like, should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? To the point where all my friends were just sick to death of me talking about it. And then eventually I got a letter from my landlord putting the rent up by a quarter, right in the midst of the cost of living crisis kind of all kicking off. And I thought, if I was waiting for a sign, here it is. So I bought this van as a completely empty panel van. I sold all of my furniture. I gave away most of my belongings that I didn't want to take with me. I moved back to my parents, who were so supportive, even though they had absolutely no idea why I'd want to do this. They decided that they would help. So I moved back in with them, and we spent the next almost a year basically just working out on the van every day, building, planning, figuring out the next parts, and just chipping away at it. And it did take way longer than I thought it would, and cost a lot more than I thought it would. Somewhere around month 8 of that process, the fear really started to hit me. So I had to work a couple of days from the office, which isn't near where my parents live. So I decided to take the van kind of half done. It was finished enough that I could sleep in it. I had the heat in, and it was winter, so I needed the heat in. And just do a bit of a trial run and see how it felt, and also just kind of figure out if there was any final little tweaks I want to make before we finished it off, just in terms of where things are and storage options and whatever. And it was a difficult night. I was really freaking out. I felt really, really uneasy, and I actually filmed some of that night because I was vlogging at the time, and I thought it might help me to calm down a bit just by talking to somebody, even if that was a camera. Almost talking to like nobody, in a sense, was the idea. But yeah, here's some footage of Jodie back in early 2023 having a little bit of a calm freak out about the feelings I was having.
I'm in the van. This is the first night sleeping in it. Obviously it's not finished, there's a long way to go. But I'm feeling weird, if I'm honest. Had this idea like a year ago that I would do this van conversion and then live in a van, and how fun and exciting would that be? And honestly, the closer I get to that becoming a reality, the more scared I am of it. I know this isn't just me. I'm in enough Facebook groups, and I have been for years, reading other people have very similar thoughts, feeling like I just feel weird. I'm in a pub car park where I've been before. There's a place where I know they're quite happy if you buy a meal that you can stay in the car park. Last time I was here it was with my now ex-boyfriend, and when we came here we had 2 vans between us, and there was another one already parked up when we arrived, which was clearly people staying in. And it's different on your own, it really is. I mean, we'd spent I don't know how many nights together in his van, like over the course of the relationship, maybe like 40, 50 nights in different places. I always felt pretty safe. There was a few places that were a bit strange, but you kind of get the feel for where they are. Sometimes it feels strange, but you know it's still the best place to be. Not unsafe, just different, I guess. Oh, but this is just uncomfortable. I know it's new. I hope this fades. I hope it's just nerves. But I'm kind of terrified of what if it isn't? What if this isn't for me and I've made a very expensive mistake? I mean, nothing's ever, forever. I could sell the van, I could find a flat to rent again, but it would just feel like I've failed. And I don't like the idea of that feeling. And my friends say, it doesn't mean you failed, it just means you tried something and decided it wasn't for you, which is valid. But it's hard to not feel that way. And I don't feel unsafe. I mean, I'm quite happy here. I think this is a really nice little stopover. I'd happily come here again. I don't feel like anything bad's gonna happen. Like from outside the van, like anyone attacking me or anything. And now I'm not gonna get moved on. I've got permission to be here. I just can't seem to settle it in my brain. I always felt fine in the small van that I used to have, that I sold. That was just so small inside, like the bed took up the entirety of the area. And it just felt like being in a tent almost, like in a little den. Even just filming this, I feel really vulnerable. I feel really exposed. I don't know what I feel. I want to love this van, I really do. And I want to love the lifestyle. And I can't really articulate really how I feel right now, except for on edge. And afraid. And I don't like it. And I'm afraid that it won't change.
Yeah, so I know a lot of people worry about safety, and that's a legit concern. But for me, I was just freaking out that I wouldn't enjoy it. That I'd spent all this time, all this money, all this effort, and, asked my parents to be doing this as well, because, the 3 of us were outside basically working on this every day, embarking on this huge project that entirely took over my whole life for about a year. just to complete it and move into the van and realise it wasn't what I wanted, it wasn't what I'd hoped it would be, and that it wasn't for me, and I wouldn't enjoy it, and that I'd failed somehow. So this is what was running through my head back then. It's things like, living in the van is for go with the flow people who are free-spirited adventurers, and I'm a planner who enjoys routine and schedules and knowing what's coming, knowing what's happening, and having a bit more certainty. So there's a good chance I'm going to hate it. And I really don't like making decisions. So why am I entering a lifestyle willingly where I'm going to have to make loads of decisions all of the time, pretty much every day, like where am I going next, where am I going to sleep, where am I going to get resources that I need, like what's tomorrow going to look like, and I need to juggle all of this alongside my job, alongside my social life, alongside just my plans. And what if I need stability? What if I don't enjoy waking up in a different place every day, or a different town every day? And maybe I don't want to be so responsible for myself, because when you're in a house, especially if you're renting, which is what I was doing before, if you have a problem you call the landlord. They sort it out for you. If something goes wrong in this van, like, because it's all done custom and because I've pretty much built most of it, if something goes wrong, the only person that's going to know how to fix it is going to be me. I'm going to know where the problem is or where to look for the problems. Do I really want that responsibility on my shoulders as well? And there's just so many things that could go wrong that I couldn't fix, like mechanically. What if the van's in an accident? What if the engine dies? What if the parts break that bankrupt me trying to repair, and I never really repair because I hear this story from other people? What if the van is stolen? What if someone crashes into it and it's written off? What if it's vandalised? What if I'm attacked? And I know we're getting into like pretty extreme scenarios here, but when your whole home is in a vehicle, the consequence of something happening to that vehicle, it affects then your entire home and everything that you have. And the likelihood of that happening in a house is a lot less. You know, there could be a house fire or a gas explosion and you lose the whole home. But that's very, very rare. Vehicles get written off all the time. Houses do not burn down all the time. So it's really easy to, like, what's the word? Not disastrophize. Catastrophize. It's easy to catastrophize all these awful scenarios of how your life may be just ruined in one awful moment. But luckily, by the time I'd finished the build, the excitement had overtaken the anxiety. So my first weekend in the van was at Camp Quirky, which is a camper van festival in England, and that was absolutely perfect because I spent my first weekend surrounded by other people in vans, and not all of them live in them, but a lot of them did or wanted to, and comparing myself to people with that mentality rather than compare myself to people who live in a house and think that living in a van is absolutely insane really made me feel less crazy of what I was doing. So that was a really good introduction. Then pretty much the week after that, I took my best friend up to Liverpool for the Eurovision Song Contest because we were hosting that year, and that was A, really good fun, and B, something that we could not have done without the van because there was not a hotel room or an Airbnb or anything to be had in the whole city or even close by. So we took the van, we stayed in a car park, and we couldn't have done it any other way. Then a couple of weeks after that, I was at Glastonbury volunteering with Oxfam. I got a video of that one too, that's up here. And just having the time of my life at this amazing festival with my whole home with me. And I just felt so privileged and so lucky and so grateful that I have all this luxury and comfort on a festival site when there's 200,000 people there, like living out of a tent for a week, lying on the ground. And I think that perspective when I first got into the van really helped me to see all the reasons why it's such a great way to live instead of the fear. And just gradually, as time passes and I'm seeing this evidence of just how exciting my life can be, and also like every one of my friends was just so hyped that I was living this exciting, adventurous life. And then, yeah, the fear just wasn't a thing anymore. And the more time that I spend travelling, taking friends in the van with me, meeting other people in vans along the way, or just not traveling and just staying in one place for a while, and spending time with people and just living a pretty ordinary life in one position, but I just don't have a home, I have a van. All of this, I guess, it gives me the flexibility that I can have routine if I like by staying in one place, or I can live free and wild and just travel and move locations every day. Like, I still have the freedom of that choice as well as the freedom of everywhere. So the more time that passes, you know, as I spent the first 10, 30, 50 days, 100 days, I'm probably on 600 by now, I don't know. Like, all this time passes and all of those fears haven't come true. So I start to realise that it was just a fear. The potential for those drastic things is always there, but I now trust in the likelihood that they won't happen. And all of these things just don't feel like this big deal anymore, that one day, that one time I was so fixated on. I mean, it wasn't just that one day, that was in my head for quite some time until I finished the build. So the truth is, I feel so comfortable now in my van. I feel safe, I feel secure, I feel really grateful, and it's all because of experience. So, if anybody out there is thinking, I love this idea of living in a van, but maybe it's not for me. Maybe it is. And there are ways of testing it out without going whole hog and doing the whole build like I did. You could hire one for a little while. You could go out with a friend if you know anybody that's got one for a week somewhere and just go on a little travel. See how it feels, get a feel for it. If you did want to buy one, you can buy one that's already made. You haven't got to build it from scratch. I went all out. You know, I spent a lot of money and a lot of time putting everything into this because I wanted to live as comfortably as I could. I didn't want to be compromising. I love that word. No, I didn't want to be like slumming it. I didn't want to be like living a difficult life. I wanted everything to be as easy as I could. I wanted to have enough of everything: water, power, comfort, space, storage, you know. I didn't want to have to go without unless I had to go without. So I built my van that way. And I know a lot of other people now who live in vans, and a few of them have done it as much as I have in terms of those facilities, and others have maybe 60-70% of what I've got, and they still live in it pretty happily. So yeah, be bold, feel the fear, do it anyway. You never know what you might learn about yourself, about the world. I have no regrets at all of doing this. I would do it again in a heartbeat. I love this life way more than I imagined I would. And that's another thing, actually. I kind of went into this with various scenarios, right? Maybe I'll tolerate it and I'll save money and I'll put up with it for a couple of years to save money, and then I'll go back to a flat. Or it'll be quite fun, but it'll be really challenging, and I'll learn things about myself that are really valuable, like life lessons, and, you know, it'll be a good like growth journey for me. But none of the situations that I kind of imagined ahead of time were the one that is the reality, which is I love it. I honestly didn't even dare to imagine that as a potential scenario, which is really funny looking back in hindsight. But I genuinely do love it. I do love the freedom of just being able to go wherever I like, whether that's visiting people or visiting places or going to events, and everywhere I go I can take my home with me. I can take comfort with me, security with me. I don't have to fork out for hotel rooms. I don't have to research for hotel rooms and locations. I just find somewhere that I can safely and legally park, and I just go there, which is sometimes campsites, you know, it's not always on the road. But you can make what you like of this life. I know people who live predominantly in campsites. I know people who refuse to ever use a campsite. I know people that do a bit of both when it's convenient to them. There's a lot of freedom in this. There's also a lot of freedom to choose how much structure and schedule and routine you have in your life. It's still an option to have that if you want to. I'd be really interested if there's anybody watching this who is on the fence, who's been considering doing this and isn't quite sure if it's for them. What fears are holding you back? I'm really interested to know how my experience compares to other people's with that like pre-van life apprehension. Maybe I can give some advice if I can on how I overcame those same things. So let's have a chat, pop a comment in, and I might do another video on security and safety. If there's a desire for that, let me know as well, and I'll do another video on it. Okay, bye!